All right, so you want to learn better, right? Like
Yeah.
really get a handle on things quicker and more completely.
Totally. And we've got just the thing to help you do that. Today, we're diving into the Feynman technique.
The Feynman technique. What is that exactly?
Well, think of it this way. It's this awesome method for really understanding tough ideas
Oh,
by actively breaking them down and explaining them so simply anyone could get it.
anyone.
Yeah, even like you're teaching it to someone totally new to the subject.
Interesting. And we've got a couple of insightful articles that lay out this method, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll be pulling from those throughout this deep dive.
So the big promise here is faster, more efficient learning, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not just faster, but deeper. Understanding that really sticks with you.
Okay, so that's the mission then, right? Equipping our listeners with a solid practical grasp of this Feynman technique.
Yep, so you can walk away and start applying it right away to whatever you're trying to learn.
All right, so let's get into it then. Who was this Feynman guy anyway, and why should we care about how he learned things?
Okay, so Richard Feynman. This guy was a total rock star in physics, a Nobel Prize winner whose work reshaped how we understand quantum mechanics and particle physics.
Yeah.
Seriously brilliant.
No kidding. Our sources mention that Omni magazine even called him the smartest man in the world back in '79.
Yes, 79.
Yeah.
That's right. And you know what's really cool, though? His brilliance wasn't just like some magic gift. It was something he totally cultivated through a very specific way of thinking and learning.
Okay, so this wasn't just raw brain power. He had a method.
A method for sure.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we're unpacking today.
All right, so one of our sources talks about this notebook he kept at Princeton, Notebook of Things I Don't Know About. That title alone is kind of intriguing.
Right, like he was actively seeking out what he didn't know.
Exactly. And it wasn't just for jotting down facts. He used it to break down complex physics ideas into simpler pieces and then rebuild them using his own language.
That's at the heart of it right there.
Yeah.
That active reorganization of knowledge. That's how he made it stick.
So it's not just reading and highlighting. It's about actively processing the information.
You got it. And this really connects with that famous Einstein quote, too. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. But it's easy to just gloss over it.
Right. But with the Feynman technique, it's not just a saying. It's like the guiding principle. Pushing yourself to explain something simply, that's how you find those gaps in your understanding.
Because when you have to explain it, you can't hide behind jargon or fuzzy concepts.
Exactly. You have to really know it. And that's where the learning magic happens.
So this Feynman technique, it's not just for physics nerds, right?
Nope. Not at all. Our sources emphasize that this is a tool for learning literally anything new.
Anything.
Yeah, really. Whether it's like super technical stuff or something completely different. This technique can help you get it better, remember it longer, and even ace those tests.
So this is sounding pretty good, but let's get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
Why should someone actually invest their time in this Feynman technique? What are the real benefits here?
Okay, so the biggest one, a truly solid understanding of whatever you're studying.
Okay, but what does that actually mean?
It means when you can break down a complex idea and explain it in simple terms, you're not just memorizing facts, you're getting the core principles, why things work, how they work.
So it's not just knowing the what, it's knowing the how and the why.
Precisely. And that deeper understanding leads to something else that's huge, being able to use what you've learned in real life.
Right. I see that in one of the articles, that the Feynman technique makes you better at connecting concepts to actual problems.
Exactly. It's not just theoretical anymore. You can adapt the knowledge to new situations, see the principles at play in different contexts.
Makes sense. And this is good for more than just our own personal learning, right?
Oh, definitely. Think about it. By practicing how to explain things, simply you're getting better at teaching and critical thinking.
True. You have to really organize your thoughts to communicate effectively.
Right. And this is where it gets super interesting, especially if you're someone who isn't crazy about writing long explanations.
You mean like me?
Maybe? Well, one of the articles mentions Feynman wasn't big on that either. He preferred talking and even used really simple, almost cartoonish diagrams to get his points across.
So this is visual too.
Totally. He was all about stripping away complicated language and getting to the heart of things with shapes, lines, stories, stuff that anyone can grasp.
Okay, I'm liking this more and more. So how do we actually use this technique? What are the steps?
All right, let's break it down for you. There are 4 main steps.
Let's hear them.
Okay, first step, pick a topic. Anything you want to understand.
Okay, my topic, what next?
Grab a piece of paper or open a doc and write that concept down as a heading. Then just start writing down everything you know about it. Don't edit yourself. Just get it all out.
Just brain dump it.
Exactly. And keep this handy because you'll be adding to it later.
Got it. Step 1 done. What's next?
Step 2. This is where the real learning kicks in. You're going to teach this concept to a new student.
Okay, but I don't have a student.
Doesn't matter. It's imaginary. Picture explaining this to someone who knows nothing about it. Use the simplest language possible. No jargon allowed.
So like I'm talking to a 5-year-old.
Kind of. The goal is to make it crystal clear. And one of the articles even suggests trying to explain a real-life example too, just to see if you can actually apply the concept.
That makes sense. So what if I get stuck? I mean, what if I can't explain it clearly?
That's actually great news. That's step 3.
Getting stuck is good?
In this case, yes.
Yeah.
It means you've hit a snag in your understanding. And that's valuable information.
Okay, I see. So I figure out where I'm getting lost, and then what?
Then you go back to your sources.
Yeah.
Your notes, the articles, books, whatever you're using to learn. And you dig deeper into those specific parts you struggled with. Then you try explaining it again.
So it's all about refining the explanation.
Exactly. Learning isn't a one-time thing. It's this process of getting it wrong, figuring out why, and trying again.
And repeat until it clicks.
Exactly. You're building that understanding brick by brick.
Got it. So what's the final step?
Step 4, simplify. Take your explanation and make it even more accessible. Think like you're explaining it to a kid who knows absolutely nothing about the subject.
Okay, so dumb it down, basically.
Well, not exactly. It's more like distilling it down to its essence.
Yeah.
Using simple, everyday words that anyone can understand.
And this is where analogies come in, right?
You got it. The articles really highlight how powerful analogies can be. Think of them as mental shortcuts. They connect new information to something you already know.
Like that classic one, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey.
Exactly. Helps you remember which way to turn a screw. And one of the articles mentions a great analogy from Feynman himself about atoms.
What was it?
He said atoms are like little particles that move around in perpetual motion, attracting each other when they are a little distance apart, but repelling upon being squeezed into one another.
So simple, but it gets the idea across.
Right. And what's even cooler is that creating your own analogies is even more powerful.
Why is that?
Because it forces you to really understand the concept. You're not just memorizing someone else's analogy, you're coming up with your own way to connect the dots.
Okay, so this Feynman technique, it's pretty amazing. But is it the best way to learn absolutely everything?
Well, no, not necessarily. Like if you just need to memorize a bunch of facts, like dates for a history test or vocab words.
Rote memorization.
Yeah, then flashcards or mnemonics might be better. The Feynman technique is really about getting that deep integrated understanding, seeing the big picture and how all the pieces fit together.
Okay, so it's not just about memorizing isolated facts.
Right. It's about connecting the dots, understanding the why and the how.
All right, so how can we actually use this technique in our everyday learning? Got any practical tips?
Tons.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing you can do is pay attention to when you're learning something new and you just don't quite get it.
Like when it's still fuzzy in my head.
Exactly. So after a lecture or reading, go back through your notes and find those areas where you're like, wait, what? Or where you can't explain the connection between ideas.
Okay, and then I use the Feynman technique on those specific parts.
Right. You break it down, simplify it, teach it to your imaginary student. It's like a targeted attack on your knowledge gaps.
Got it. So what about those analogies? How can I use those more effectively?
Instead of just passively reading them, challenge yourself to create your own.
Like come up with my own ways to connect new information to things I already know.
Exactly. It forces you to think about the concept in a different way, and it makes it way more memorable.
Like instead of just knowing what a metaphor is, I could come up with my own metaphor to explain it.
Exactly. You're taking ownership of the knowledge. And the article mentions this cool example of the pyramid structure analogy for story writing.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. It really helps to visualize the different elements of a story.
See, powerful stuff. And another great way to use the Feynman technique is in study groups.
Oh, yeah, bouncing ideas off each other.
Exactly. Take turns teaching each other the material using the Feynman technique. When someone gets stuck, work together to simplify it till it clicks for everyone.
So it's like collaborative learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone benefits. And you know that whole thing about learning by doing? Well, this is like learning by teaching.
And even if you're studying solo, you can still self-test using this technique, right?
Absolutely. Try explaining the concepts out loud without looking at your notes.
Like giving a presentation to an empty room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great way to see what you actually know and what you need to brush up on.
Okay, so we've talked about the steps and the benefits, but let's zoom out for a second. Why is this whole teaching thing so important for understanding?
You know, Feynman himself believed almost anyone could learn anything with enough effort. He didn't think he was like super smart or anything.
So it wasn't just about raw intelligence.
Nope. He just had a system, a really good system for figuring out what he didn't know and then learning it.
And that system was all about actively working with the information, right?
Yes. Taking it apart, simplifying it, teaching it. That was his secret sauce.
I love that one of the articles mentions how he prepared for his big oral exams. He didn't just reread his notes. He made that notebook of things I don't know about and then basically taught himself the concepts from scratch.
Talk about taking ownership of your learning, right?
For sure. And think about it. When you teach something, you have to really understand it. You can't just fake it.
Exactly. It forces you to organize your thoughts, find the gaps in your knowledge, and come up with clear explanations.
And there's that added bonus of building confidence too, right?
Totally. When you can explain something clearly to someone else, it's like, boom, I got this.
And that confidence fuels you to keep learning.
Totally. It's a positive feedback loop. And on a neurological level, the repetition involved in teaching actually strengthens those connections in your brain, which means you remember the information better and longer.
So teaching is like a brain workout.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You're building those mental muscles.
Okay, so we've all been there. We're trying to explain something using the Feynman technique, and we hit a wall. What do we do then?
Don't panic. It's totally normal. Go back to your source material. That's step 3, remember.
Right, back to the books, notes, articles.
Exactly. And it's not just about fixing that one explanation. It's about deepening your understanding. You're actively using the source material to refine your thinking.
So it's not just passive reading anymore. It's like I'm having a conversation with the material.
I like that.
Yeah.
And that back and forth, that's what helps the information stick.
And sometimes going back to the source, you see things you missed the first time, right?
Absolutely. Like you might notice new connections or subtle details that you didn't pick up on before.
It's like the material unfolds more each time you revisit it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as you get more comfortable with the topic, you can even start looking at multiple sources to get a more well-rounded perspective.
So don't be afraid to go deep.
The more you explore, the more you discover.
Okay, so let's wrap this up with one final thought. What's the most important thing we want our listeners to take away about the Feynman technique?
I think it's this. The Feynman technique is about empowering you to learn with more clarity and confidence. It's about moving beyond just memorizing facts and really understanding the how and the why.
It's about becoming a more active, engaged, and effective learner.
Exactly. And that's something anyone can do.
So if you're ready to unlock your learning potential, give the Feynman technique a try. You might be surprised at how much it changes the way you learn.
And on that note, think about something you've always wanted to understand, but it's just felt too complicated or overwhelming.
Like maybe you started learning it and just gave up because it was too much.
Exactly. What if you just tried that very first step of the Feynman technique? Just sit down and write down everything you think you know about it. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Yeah, maybe you'll find some gaps in your knowledge, or maybe you'll see the concept in a whole new way.
And that could be the spark that ignites a whole new passion for learning.
We challenge you to give it a shot. Pick one thing you want to learn and apply just one step of the Feynman technique. See what happens.